So in this video, I'll be providing a detailed information on how to write a test cases for a drop-down field. The first validation you should make here is every drop-down should have a label in it. That is the first validation you should make. Then the second one is any drop-down certain time it will have a default value. It will have a certain default value. Maybe drop-down may have 100 different options, but by default it will get selected one value in it. That is the default value. And also you should test what are the different combinations of values available in a drop down. If it is in database, if you have 10 different options but you are getting in a drop down just only 2 or 3, then you should also validate all different combinations. One is from the UI perspective or from the database perspective, whether the data is getting pulled into the drop down appropriately or not. Then you should also test for, there are certain drop downs, there is an option to select multiple values in it. You will also have a checkbox in every item which is listed in the drop down. So there also you should validate all different combination for the checkbox plus the drop down as well. Whichever I selected in the checkbox, those should selected as part of drop down selection, including drop down field plus the content in the drop down, whether it is a left align or a right align. That kind of testing also you should validate it. Then for all the drop down fields which is implemented in your application, just to see it can be accessed across all different combinations of browser, different kinds of operating system, just to ensure that this drop-down field is behaving as expected across different combinations of browsers and operating systems. There is also another scenario which you should write here is, because most of the drop-downs were sorted in alphabetical order or certain order. Whenever I selected a particular field, when I click on certain alphabet keys, let's say if I select G, then any word which is starting with the letter G should list down first there. So that kind of sorting should happen. I select Z, then all the data related to Z should display. So that kind of testing scenario also you should write, and you should test it just to ensure that it works as expected. Next type of test scenarios are performance related test cases, because these drop downs may have hundreds of values. Let's say if we talk about a country name, the countries can have hundreds of countries in this world. Now whenever this data is getting pulled from the databases, whether it comes very fast or it takes a lot of time, how we are going to test that? That will be getting validated using the performance testing. So you should perform different kinds of combinations of performance testing just to ensure that its response time and throughput is coming as expected as per the requirements. And also you should ensure that all the spelling mistakes, font size, colors, everything you should validate appropriately. Again, those should be aligned with your US guidelines which is defined for your application. Then the next test case which you should write for dropdown is all the data which is present in the dropdown should be ordered in certain way. It can be ascending order or descending order. Appropriate way you should display. If your requirement says that it should be in ascending, then you should display it in ascending. If it is requirement says that it should be descending, then it should be descending. So you should ensure that it displays in an appropriate way. Next type of test scenario you should write here is minimum and maximum. What is the minimum value this value can take for this drop down? What is the maximum drop down field can take the value for this drop down? So that kind of validations also you should make as part of your testing the drop down field. Next type of testing is you should also validate for a given drop down field is editable or not editable. If it is not editable, means you cannot select anything out of this drop down. So you should ensure that the given drop-down field is editable or not editable. If your requirement says that a drop-down field should be editable one, then appropriately you should test with the test scenarios. If it is disabled, then your test cases also should be able to tackle that requirement. Then the next type of test scenario is, because the drop-downs will be used in your web application or mobile application, you should ensure that these drop downs work seamlessly across different languages, different currency, all different combination, because your drop down values can be Chinese, Japanese, Hindi, Kannada, Tamil, Telugu, any languages in that matter. Your drop down should work seamlessly based on your country, based on your languages, based on the internationalization or localization. Also validate for database validation. As I said earlier, any operation which you do on drop down, after doing the operation in the drop down, when you click on submit or when you are doing certain commit operation, then the data should go and submit into the database. You should ensure whatever the data which you enter in this drop down, same data should go into the database. Then all the different combinations to and fro from database, the all different kinds of testing we should make. Even I'm going to change in the database whether it is getting reflected in the UI or not. The next scenario is whatever the operation you perform on this drop down, on any cost, any exception should not throw, your server should not crash. You should ensure that by covering whatever the test cases which I have just talked about, all the test cases if you executed for a given field, that would guarantee your drop down field really works as expected. So in this video, I'll be discussing about how to write the test cases for a text field or a text box. So in this video, I will be covering very important test case scenarios. The first test case, if you can see here, right, the first test case is to verify the text field, the label. Every text field or a text box should have a label in it. It should have a clear and meaningful label for every text field in order to identify that text field or a text box. Second important test scenario which you should verify here is whether the given text field which you are verifying, whether which is a mandatory field or a non-mandatory field. If it is a mandatory field, means if we are not entering anything in this field, if without entering anything, if you are trying to navigate, then it should throw an error message saying that this is a mandatory field and this is the characters you should enter for this text field. That is the error message it should pop up, and that kind of validation also you should make to ensure that the core UI validation is taken care. Or a third test scenario is in the text field or in the text box, whenever we are trying to enter the text in it, when there should be a cursor also it should display whenever we are typing in the text field or a text box. Then the fourth test scenario which you should write here is the limit of the text field or a text box. So how many character it can take that text box or a text field, minimum set of characters and maximum set of characters we should validate. As per your requirement, you should validate both minimum and maximum requirement just to ensure that the text field is in line with the requirement for a given minimum and maximum character limit for this field. Then the fifth test scenario you should validate here is the alignment of text in this text box or a text field, whether the text is left aligned or a text is right aligned. That is also you are required to be validated. Sixth test scenario you should taken care here is the icon for every text field. If there is a facility of an icon, if you can see right in the in the email, we have a icon mail symbol is there. In the similarly here, if you can see right, at gmail.com is there. These are the icons which represent what is this all about text field or a text box. Based on your requirement, if something there is a requirement to call out this for a given field, you should have something like this, then you should validate that as well. Then the seventh important test case is for the text field is voice input. These days everywhere the search is taken care using voice input, and many functionality is been evolved via voice. If the given field which is implemented using voice input for a given text field or a text box, then you should validate that functionality as well, that scenario as well, part of your testing. And the eighth scenario is, especially this scenario will be useful for a password field or CVV field where you wanted to keep the data secret, you wanted to hide the important critical information, then we'll mask the data with star star or some other things. You should have an option to whether I wanted to show the password or not. If checkbox is there, if I select checkbox, then only you should show the characters, otherwise you should hide. That kind of test case also you should validate as part of show or hide the text field or a text box. Then the ninth one is verify the text field or a text box is editable or a disabled. There are few places the text field will be disabled and it populates the value automatically without being entered by us. That type of validation also you have to make. If the given requirement says that it should be enabled, it should be able to editable, then you should write the appropriate test scenario or test cases. Otherwise, it should be disabled where I should not be able to enter anything via keyboard or voice or anything. The 10th test scenario or a test case is verifying for whether the text field is enabled for over or not. Over means whenever we're trying to place a cursor on any text field or a text box, then appropriate messages should come. If you go and place your cursor on Google search box, then you will see this kind of message. It will tell what is this all about this text field. So that kind of validation also you should make. There is a requirement that hover is enabled for this field, then appropriate test scenario you should write. Then the 11th one is a helper text. Especially this is very useful where we wanted to give certain message for a user. For example, for a given password field, there are situations that certain application or certain features, it can only take 8 characters, 10 characters or 12 characters. There we should clearly give information to the user that this field can only take these many characters only, these many special characters only. This type of, that kind of messages should be given below the text field or a text box. The requirement says that there should be a helper message should be there in your text field, then this kind of test scenarios also you should validate. Then the 12th test case or test scenario for a text box or a text field is verifying for a text for auto format, especially if the text field is used for a currency. Every country, the currency will be shown differently in a different format. Then your text field should also be able to take care appropriately bifurcating hundreds, thousands, lakh, million, and so on. And also for phone field, how the phone number should be representable in your application, then appropriate test cases or appropriate validations you should make. If your text field is used to represent the date of birth field, then appropriately should display in a different way, month, year, or day, or year, month, day, or day, month, year, and so many different formats. Based on your requirement, appropriate validation you should take. How you can write a test cases for Gmail sign up and how you can write a test cases for Gmail registration. The first of all, we will talk about is registration. So normally when you go to the any browser, and enter gmail.com, then you will be taken up to the sign in page where you can enter your email or a phone, or there is also an option called as a create account. If you can see, right, this is an option also. You will have it, you will have an option create account also there, where by clicking this it will take you to create account page where you can create a new account altogether. So first of all we will focus on create account, which is a registration page. After that, once this is done, we will go back to the sign in test cases. So in order to come to this page, sign in page, basically you should go back to the Gmail URL. After entering the Gmail URL, then there is a sign in button will be there on the right side. When you click on sign in button, you will get into this page. Then now you have to click on create account. Now you will see the next page where we wanted to enter all the information related to the user when we are going to create a Gmail account. When you click on create account, so we'll be seeing something the screen would look like. So if you can see, right, so we have a first name, we have a last name, then you have a username at gmail.com, and also we have password, which is first password, then again confirmation password, then also we have show password checkbox is there. So these are the some of the text fields we have in this page. Now how can we go and write test cases for every field which is available in this page? So first of all we will see the first name and last name. So what are the test cases which we can write? The first name and last name here basically a text field. Basically it is a text field, the first name and last name. So I will be talking about certain test cases here. First of all, we should validate. So whatever the first name and last name, whether we can enter a character or whether we can enter a numbers. So before, as a note, before writing any test cases, before writing any kind of test cases for whatever the functionality you can talk about, first you should understand what are the requirements. Even somebody asks you in the interview, if somebody asks you in the interview, can you go and write a test cases for certain things? For them, you just ask them, can you tell me what are the requirements? So based on the requirements, then only you can write a test case. So similarly here as well, it is not just have 2 or 3 fields. You should also ask what is the requirement. Let's say first name and last name. What are the different validations we need to make? What are the conditions we have to make? Whether these fields are mandatory or not. All those validations, requirements you should get from your customer so that you can put those test cases in your testing bucket. Unless if the requirements are not clear, definitely you will be putting your test cases in a very vague manner and which is of no use. At the end of the day, all your test cases should trace back to your requirement. That is where the RTM will come into picture. When you are not able to trace back all your test cases back into requirement, there is no point in writing any test cases. Hence, the first thing is you should do here is get the requirement, what you really require to validate. So first name and last name will be validating by entering appropriate characters, appropriate numbers, and also will be tested with uppercase and lowercase. Based on your requirement, whether it is a mandatory or a non-mandatory, your requirements will talk about it. Hence, first you need to validate your requirements. The next is the minimum characters allowed and maximum character allowed both in the first name and last name text fields. This also needs to be get a requirement from your business analyst and product owner. Then only you can write the appropriate. You cannot just imagine minimum is this much and maximum is that much. That needs to be called out clearly in your requirement. The next thing is we should also validate it for any negative test cases. Negative cases means maybe you start pumping to the first name and last name some special characters, or maybe some of the tags from HTML code or even JavaScripts. Normally what happens, right? Somebody trying to put these special characters into these fields, normally application behaves drastically a different way. I've seen many places, if we start giving some these JavaScripts, we can easily hack the system, we can get the information from the databases. I've seen that kind of situations as well. Because of that, it is better to provide HTML tags and JavaScripts into this text field to see is there any possibility that we can retrieve certain data from the database. We don't know. So hence we should validate those aspects as well. The next test case is whenever you enter the first name and last name with some name followed by some spaces. Maybe let's say Gangadhar, Ganga space and Dhar. Now whenever I try to say, you should get the space should get trimmed out. If the space is not getting trimmed out, then we have a problem, because you should not take the spaces. Again, this is also based on your requirement. If requirement says that you should keep the space, then you should keep the space, otherwise you should trim it off. You should also check for, let's say you have something, let's say you have stored some first name Gangadhar in a notepad, then I copy that Gangadhar from the notepad. If I try to put it to the first name, still you should accept it. If it is not accepting, then we have a problem. You should have copy paste. You should be able to perform on this first name and as well as last name as well. And you should also validate the UI elements. UI element means the coloring, then the alignment and the size of the text field. All those things you should validate, even font size of the text we are entering. So all these validations you should do in terms of the UI perspective. So you can add some more test cases to validate those aspects as well in terms of the UI perspective. Then the next one is, whenever, let's say after I entered the first name, then I wanted to move on to the last name, where I wanted to enter again last name. So some people, what they will do, they will take a mouse and they will place a cursor on the last name. But let's say some people will not have a mouse. That is the time where we will use tab. Tab, what will do is, it will move the cursor from first name to last name, and again it goes back to the another field, which is goes in a sequence. Hence many people uses tab keyword as well. Hence it is always to test whether the order is going appropriately or not whenever I am clicking on tab button. That is also, that kind of test cases also you should validate it. So till now, at least you guys are able to understand the first name and last name, what are the different kinds of test cases you should write. Maybe think through yourself. You can also come up with a lot of new test cases, maybe validate against all the testing techniques. It could be boundary value analysis, or it could be equivalence partitioning, or it could be many testing techniques are there. You can adapt for every validation. If you adapt different combination, definitely we can get a lot of test cases. The next thing is, so we will validate for username, which is an email altogether. So this is an account. Whenever I try to create an email ID where I will be giving username, which is very crucial. And let's see what are the validations we can make for username. So here we will be validating username with a right email ID. So right email ID means whether it can take a special characters. Again, as I said, you should get a requirement from your customer. Basically, what are the things for username it can take. And definitely email IDs, you should not take certain special characters. Those things should also validate it. And even username cannot have 200 characters, right? It will have minimum maybe 8 characters minimum, and maximum is character this many. So again, these things also you should get from the requirements, and any numbers also can be included in the username. There are certain email ID can be, you can place a period followed by maybe, let's say, test.123@gmail.com, test.test123@gmail.com, something like that we can provide. So we should look into that kind of test cases also to validate whether it accepts minimum, maximum characters, letters, numbers, and a period. Then also you should validate, let's say I'm not going to give any username, so I'm not going to enter anything in this field, how it reacts. You should throw an error message, because you cannot just keep empty username, then I can ask Google to create an account. That is not possible. So you should validate, that is also an error message, you should validate it. Now you are able to get an idea. So for username, what are the test cases you can write. Then we will move on to the password field test cases. Password field test cases we will see. So password field, so basically we have a password, then we have a confirmation password. So what are the different test cases we can write for a password? We have a requirement from Google Password where it says that password can have 8 characters, password can have a letter, number and a symbol. So this is the requirement. Then you should validate a password should be at least minimum 8 characters you should be able to take. Then also the password should be a mix of letters, numbers and symbols. That is next test cases. Then the password also should not contain any spaces and even a period. Then how much maximum password it can take, because they are talking about only 8 and more. They have not given the upper limit. Then this also needs to be validated. If let's say if somebody gives a junk text, maybe let's say 2000 characters of a password, whether it takes, that also you should validate it. Again, you collect from the requirement. If they say I can only handle 20 characters, then you should limit yourself 20 characters. If your product owner says that no, I can have password up to 100 characters, then you should test for an 100 character. There is also a checkbox is the show password. Unless if I am not clicking on that show password, password should be hidden for you. You should be in the star mark. Whenever I say click on show password, then only the text field should be able to show the password to you. That is also a test cases you should write and you should validate for it. Then password and confirmation password should be both are one and the same. Let's say I entered certain password, then confirmation password, if it is totally different, then it should throw an error message. There is a mismatch in the your password enter. So that is also another validation you should make. And once you enter everything, let's say password you entered, confirm password you entered, when you click on next, if all the first name, last name, username, password, if you enter everything, then it will take you to the next page. Let's say you entered first name, last name, username, but password you did not enter and click on next. What will happen? It should throw an error message to you saying that you should enter your password. Then you should also validate, because these days they are looking your password should be strong enough, means you should be able to put various combinations of your characters, numbers and symbols that make your password very strong. So you should validate all possible combinations so that your password should be strong enough so that nobody can identify your password. So all that kind of different validations, different data you should enter for a password that guarantees that you should not be able to break the password. That kind of test case also you should write. So at least you are able to get an idea. So for a password field, what are the different types of test cases you should write. Now we will move on to the next type of test cases is a phone number. So after entering first name, last name, username and password, if you click on next button here, when you click on next button here, it will take you to the next field, which is this page, where it will tell you welcome Google with your email ID, and it asks for a phone number. And again it is an optional when you are trying to create a Google account. So let's say what are the different test cases which we can write for a phone number. Let's say if they mandates for you to enter your phone number, you should go and write a test case for phone number. What are the cases we can do here is, basically the valid phone number in India will have a 10-digit number. 10-digit number is your phone number, which is a mobile number. And we should also validate, if I give all 10 numbers, whether it accepts. If it just enter 10 number, that is not a mobile number, right? Mobile number starts with certain number, ends with certain number, and there will be a predefined sequence of numbers will be there. If I just enter some 00 10 digit, it won't accept, right? Because Google also will have a data from all the telecom vendors, Airtel, Vodafone, they will collect the data like how the phone numbers would look like, what is the different combinations in India. So all those Google have the data. Enter less than 10 digits, what will happen? You should throw error message because you have missed certain number. You should say more than 10 digit number. Then again, you should throw error message. Again, you should throw error message to you saying that you cannot have more than 10 digit. Then you try to enter some special characters in place of numbers. Again, it should throw error message. You cannot enter anything other than number. Then again, the copy paste from the other notepad to this text field, whether it really takes that value or not, that should also be validated. Validate with all the characters apart from numbers. You should throw error message, right? So these are the certain text cases you can write for a 4-number field for this page. Next thing you have is date, month and year. You have a next field is date, month and year, which is for your date of birth to be entered here. So for that, so what are the different test cases you can write? We will see. First of all, you should enter all the valid dates. Next, you will give invalid dates. Let's say I will be giving 30th February 2021. There is no day which is 30 or 31st in February. That time you should throw an error message. Similarly, you should try to put a different combinations of different combinations of test data into this date of birth field just to see whether it is throwing a appropriate error messages or not. So that kind of test cases also you should write. So after entering all the information, you entered first name, last name, then you entered your password, your username, then you came here, you entered your phone number, your date of birth, then when you click on next button, clicking of next, your account will get created. Now once your account is been created, now it is the time to sign in with that account. So we will go and check for certain test cases for how the sign in will work. So here sign in, they will ask either you should have email or a phone. Whatever you enter during create account, username, so the same thing will be required to be entered here, username at gmail.com. Then click on next. So click on next. So here the validations you should make here is the test cases you should write for is email or phone field. So what are the test cases you can write for this is here you should validate for the valid email address, then special characters you enter, then again your username or email ID should have different possible combinations of letters, numbers and period. And again minimum and maximum characters can be taken for the username. Again the validate username with the empty username. Whatever the test cases you wrote for username should be done validated here as well. Username should not contain a letter, number and a period. Now in the similar fashion how you validate for email ID, you should also validate for a phone, which we already done in the last slide. Same thing will be repeating here. We will be validating all 10 digit, less than 10 digit, more than 10 digit, special characters, copy pasting the numbers from notepad to this text field. So all those different combinations of test cases will be validating here again in this field just to see this field also works appropriately. Then after you enter those details, you will get a next field which is a password field. The password field here as well. So whatever the test cases you wrote earlier, password creation, so same thing you should validate here by your password should be at least 8 characters, then mix of letters, number and symbols and no spaces in the password. All combinations of different combinations of password you should enter, and when you click on shows password only you should show, otherwise you should not be able to show. So all those password mismatch. So whatever the test cases we wrote earlier, you should be validating here also in this field. So with this, after entering your username and password here, when you click on next, it will take you to the inbox page. After sign in, after entering username password, it will take you to the inbox. This is the overall functionality of a sign in functionality. So we have covered Gmail registration, how can we register the Gmail account and what are the fields will be there, what are the test cases we should write for those fields. Similarly, we also talked about Google sign in. Google sign in, what are the different fields will come in Google sign in, what are the test cases we should write for that. Then how the flow will go back to the inbox. So this is the overall picture of how to write a test cases for your Gmail account creation and Gmail sign in. If someone gives you the website to test, then how you are going to test. So I'll be providing detailed information on how to test that website. What are the various testing we should perform to ensure that given website really works as expected. So in order to test any web application, the first thing you should test here is by opening the website URL. The website URL, let's talk about a testingshala.com, which is a web application. Basically, it is a website where it gives all the information related to software testing. So then the first thing what we should do here is you should open the browser, then you should enter the testingshala.com. When we enter testingshala.com, you should get the complete website. Then the second thing we should also validate is whether the application is secured or unsecured, HTTPS or HTTP. If you can say, right, this is an HTTPS, which is a secured protocol. If the website related to financial things or a lot of confidential information, then definitely you should go for HTTPS. Then the third thing you should validate here is you should validate all the links in a given web application. The links can be internal links within the application, or there are certain links which can take to the other website. And the next thing we should test here is whenever click on anything, whenever we click on privacy policy, disclaimer or any link, we should take to the appropriate pages only. So if I click on privacy policy page, you should not take to the about us page. You should not throw any error messages when we click on any link in that given web application or a given website. You should take to the appropriate pages. We should validate all the fields available. The fields can be text fields, drop downs. I have already provided a lot of videos on how to test every field in a given web application, or it could be any application. I have made a lot of series of videos which you can refer. Then the next thing is for any given fields, as I said earlier, you should put both valid data and invalid data. Either it could be positive, negative, boundary conditions, every possible condition you should give for every fields available in a given website, and you should test it to ensure that all the fields works as expected. Then the next type of testing you should perform here is you should also test for cookies. You should test the given application by enabling cookies and disabling the cookies just to see that cookies are really getting stored in your local computer or not. And also you should test for all the cookies which is getting stored in your computer which is secured. It should be encrypted format. Even if I open that file, I should not be able to get the data in a visible format. So next type of testing which we normally do is validating all the grammatical errors, syntax errors required to be validated thoroughly. And also you should ensure that all the fields are in aligned with your UX guidelines. Also you should test your web application for different languages. If your website is going to be accessed from different country, then you should also test for internationalization. All kinds of different browser, all kind of different operating system, all kind of different databases. It can be application server or web server. Any combination, your web application should work seamlessly. Again here, the main thing is for your web application, if there is a requirement that you should perform all these different combinations of compatibility testing. If your web application is going to be accessed by millions of people, then we should perform the performance testing just to see what is the response time, what is the throughput, different kind of combinations of test cases you should perform by putting a concurrent load, gradual load, all kinds of load you should put into your website just to ensure that your application behaves normally for any kind of load, and also your web application should be able to scale up as and when we add up more hardware. Websites and web applications are being hosted on different web server, web application. There are a lot of security vulnerabilities, security issues will be there. We should ensure that all the different way of testing the aspects in terms of vulnerability, security aspect as part of your website testing. These days, apart from accessing your website just using desktop or laptop, even your website is going to be accessed using the mobile as well. Your website or web application still work in your mobile as well with the different resolutions, different size of mobiles. All the testing activity is done by the testing team internally. Then there will be a certain type of testing which will be done by the acceptance testing team as well, who is business users or end users who will be testing your web application or website just to ensure that everything is in line with the business requirement. Of once this business user and end user signs off, then it can be deployed into the production environment. So these are the various different types of test scenarios we should test for your website or web application. Checkbox field is also a very crucial field which will be used in every web application or mobile application. So I'll be discussing in detail what are the different types of test cases or test scenarios which you can write for. The first scenario you should write here is you should first test whatever the checkbox which you are going to test that is editable and that is selectable. That is the first thing you should test it. If something requirement says that it should be editable, then it should be editable. If it is not editable, then it should not be editable. Then the second one is the navigation flow. If your application is having a 3 checkboxes, then the navigation should come from the top. The top checkbox first, then if I click on tab, then it should come to the next checkbox and so on. You should traverse in a appropriate way. The next scenario is whenever we do any operation in the checkbox, then appropriately the data should get saved in the database, and even certain things if we do in database, then appropriately the data should get reflected in the UI element as well. That kind of to and fro testing also you should perform for this checkbox field as well. Then the fourth scenario is alignment. If it is left aligned, right aligned, whatever the different kind of US guideline has been done for your application, then appropriate US guideline also should follow for this checkbox field. Then the next scenario is the focus. By default, the checkbox focus will be in the first checkbox in that web page. If your requirement says that it should be in the second checkbox, then appropriately it should work. Next scenario is whether checkbox is enabled or disabled. If it is enabled only, I can select the checkbox, otherwise you cannot. Then we should also see to that if the given checkbox is a mandatory one or not. If it is mandatory, without selecting the checkbox, I should not be able to move on to the next field. Even if I move on to the next field, if I click on submit, it should throw an error message saying that you missed to enter the checkbox. The next scenario is if whether it is a multi-selectable or not. If the checkbox is multi-selectable, then it should work appropriately. Then the next scenario is whether checkbox can be really able to check or uncheck. There are certain time I am not able to check as well, I am not able to uncheck as well. That kind of validations also you should do it. The next scenario is we should test for location or coordination of this checkbox, because in a given web application, appropriate coordinations will be there to where to place exactly this checkbox. So these are the 10 important test scenarios which I can think for this checkbox field validation. And if you're dealing with web-based application or mobile-based application, so we will be using this Captcha functionality. So we'll try to understand what is all about a Captcha. So as per Wikipedia, by definition, Captcha is a kind of a challenge and response test, normally which will be used to determine whether the application which is accessed is a human being or a computer. So in order to verify whether the application is being accessed by a human or a robot or a bot, that time we will be using the Captcha functionality. Captcha functionality will look like something like this. So if you can see, right, they will be asking an email ID. After entering an email ID, you can submit a form. Now what happens if we don't provide this Captcha? It may happen that people can write a program just to keep entering junk email IDs and click on submit. Now because of this, your website's resources will be getting blocked. Your server may go down or server may not respond if other users are trying to access your application. In order to verify whether I am a human being or a bot, so because of that, there is an introduction of a Captcha where we will be asking to verify whether you are a robot or not. If you are not a robot, just click on this checkbox. Then after entering email IDs, application will take to the next step. That is the main purpose. Now we will try to understand what are the various different types of Captcha is available in our web application or a mobile application. This is the first type of Captcha application we have, which is reCAPTCHA test, reCAPTCHA, where it will have only one option, one checkbox will be there. Whenever user clicks on this checkbox, then it assumes that the person who is accessing this application is not a robot, it is a human being. That is the basic minimum test cases we can write for this kind of reCAPTCHA. Then the next type of Captcha is text-based Captcha. The text will be displayed something like this. The person has to look this text and he has to enter here all the text from the top to this field. That is a validation we should make. The first scenario which you can write here is we have to validate the Captcha. We have to validate the Captcha whether it is coming as per your requirement or a functionality. That is the first thing we should ensure. Now the second one is after Captcha displays in your web page or a mobile application, then we should be able to refresh the screen or a page. Whenever we try to refresh the page, then this Captcha, whatever the text which is seen here, you should get refreshed. Because complete page is getting refreshed, then this Captcha also should reload with a new Captcha in it. Then the third scenario is whatever the characters or a text which is being displayed here, it should be very much readable format and you should be able to read in a normal eyes. And based on this text, the user should be able to enter in this text field. You should validate this text field also as per the text field guidelines. I have already done the separate video on the text field. You can refer that video. Then the next type is you should also see that if there is a case sensitivity is there in this Captcha text, then the same you should enter in this text field as well. Then you should validate for both correct and incorrect Captcha. You should put the valid Captcha text into this text field and verify whether it can navigate to the next page or next functionality. If I provide an incorrect Captcha, then you should throw an error message saying that you have not entered the right text which is displayed on the top into this text field. That validation also you should make. It should only proceed further when both this Captcha text, whatever we entered here, both should match. Then only you should take to the next page. And also if you can see, right, there is one more item is there, especially this they have done it for accessibility people who have a issue in reading this text. They have an option of audio as well. Whenever we click on this audio icon, the Captcha text will come in an audio format. After listening that audio, people can enter. Even if you do a refresh click here, then the Captcha should get refreshed. You should get a different text altogether. Help icon is there. Whenever we click on this, there should be an help mechanism should be available just to tell to the user this is how you should operate in this Captcha screen. This is purely a maths based Captcha. Here the text is not present. It is just a numbers. There is some addition, subtraction, division, multiplication. It can have many complex maths equations as well, which they can provide here, just to ensure that you are a real human person is accessing this application. So let us understand what are the various different test scenarios which we can write here. One is By default, the Captcha should display. Then again, the refreshing, as we discussed earlier, whenever we do a refresh, your Captcha should display a different random Captcha, and also all the values which is being coming here, it should be more readable in a normal eyes, and also user should be able to enter this text field. What are the various test cases which we can write for text field? You can refer my another video where I have clearly given a detailed test scenarios for text field. You can refer that. Then here we should validate both correct Captcha entering here, and another one is incorrect Captcha. If you enter correct Captcha, then I should be able to continue. If I enter incorrect Captcha, then I should not be able to take it forward. Then the next type of Captcha is image based Captcha. Basically here they will try to put a different puzzles to the end user who is accessing this application, just to ensure that he should be able to identify these images, and based on that he should be able to put the selection here. So what are the different scenarios which we can write here? This is same, where all images should be able to display here, and also whenever we select any images using mouse, then appropriate images should select, and if I am going to do a skip, then the next images should come here, or new images should come here. Unless if I am not going to solve this puzzle, then you should not take it to the next page. That is all the purpose of this image based Captcha. These are the various different Captcha scenarios we have, and these are the some of the test scenarios which we can write for this Captcha functionality. What are the various test cases which you can write for date of birth field? I have provided two different types of date of birth field. One is something like this. We should be able to verify this date field with all the different combinations. It could be month, date and year format. This field can be displayed in any of these combinations. Then you should verify it appropriately. You should be able to verify the days can take 2 digits, because 1 to 31 is the maximum for days. Month is being displayed as a digits, then 1 to 12 only it can take it up here, and year can have 4-digit number. That is the thing, you should validate it. For this yearly field, only digits should work there. You should not have any characters. Verify the date field with the predefined dates. If you can see, right, everything is pre-filled here. You should not be empty in this. And you should also ensure that whenever we try to give dates here, we should consider only valid dates. In certain month, we may not have 31st date, or in February, we may not have 29 or 30th date. But also test for leap year date. As I said, leap years once in 4 years it comes, and during that time, so only February will have 29th date, 30th and 31st date won't be there. This is one way of verifying the date of birth field. We'll move on to the second type of date of birth field. Is it will look like something like this. There will be a birthday text field will be there. There you will have a calendar here. If you click on calendar, then you will get something like this. For this kind of date of birth field, how can we write test cases? The first thing is, as I said here, if I click on this icon, then this calendar window should pop up. Once it pops up, appropriate month and its date should be displayed. This date should be matched as per your system date. And as we discussed earlier, this date format can be any of this format, or it can be of this format. User wants to enter date of birth last 50 years back, or last 60 years back, last 8 years back, then you should be able to select that kind of date using this birthday field. Whenever we open a calendar, you should get a month calendar with the current date is selected in this. You should also validate there is a arrow mark which is present in this calendar. When I press on this arrow mark, then appropriate month or year should display in this date of birth field. When I select any particular day, let's say if I select this particular date 24, then year appropriate 24th date and December month and year 2021 only you should select. You should not display any other date other than what we selected. These are the very important test cases which you can write for date of birth field. So what are the various test cases which we can write for credit card functionality? So the credit cards can come from the any organization. It could be Visa, or it could be MasterCard, it could be American Business, or it could be Dinner or Mestro, or any kind of cards, which can be a debit card, credit card, ATM card. How can we verify as part of our testing? So that is a crucial aspect of this video. If you can see in this screenshot, the credit card or debit card will have a text field here. So we should be able to write the test cases for this text field, and you should also be able to write a test cases for account holder name in the card, and also you should be able to validate the expiry dates, and also you should also be validating the CVV, secret code, for the individual credit card. So let's understand what are the various test cases which we can write for these various fields available in the credit card or debit card user interface. Here, first thing we should write a test case is where we are going to check for valid debit card or gift card or credit card. By entering the valid card details, then it should accept those cards without giving any issues. By considering all the boundary conditions, if I try to enter a certain credit card, Visa, it should start with certain number. MasterCard's numbers will start with certain number. All those validations you should make it. The bank account holder name also we should validate by inputting both valid and invalid data. You should be able to validate all different combinations of expiry dates. You should validate your CVC or CVV pin by entering both valid and invalid for that credit card or debit card, and to see whether that is really taken care or not. For any of these various fields, it could be card number, name, or expiry date, or CVV. Anytime if I am able to enter the valid number, then appropriate message should come out. Anytime if I am inputting invalid data into these fields, then appropriate error messages and user friendly messages should pop up. We should ensure that this secured field should not have a mechanism of copying and pasting from some other place or from this place to some other place. These fields should be disabled for copy and paste. So these are the important test cases which we can write for this debit card or credit card.
How to write a test case for ball pen. So this is usually the one of the important questions will be asked in any interview. How can you write a test case for the pen? So there are various factors you should look into when you're writing a test cases. I'm going to talk about one by one test case, so that you can start remembering how to write these test cases. So first of all, you should write a test case. So whether the name of the pencil is coming right or not, whether the appropriate font has been given as per the requirement of this pen, or you should also write whether the cap, whatever they manufacture, is able to integrate properly with the pen or not. So whether it can easily, it is able to tighten or not. And you should also see whether the whatever the refill they are given, this is appropriately we are able to insert this pen or not. That is also one of the test case. We should write it. And also is there any leak proof with this pen refill? We should also validate whether there is any leak or any where it is leaking, or any, if you can do the bend test as well. You should not bend as much as possible. You should not break as well. So that kind of test case also you can write. And just to see whether you can insert into this cap, and it is able to appropriately insert into this so that it can hold like this. This is also another test cases. Then you should be able to insert appropriately, because the size of the refill and the cap should be in such a way that it should be able to insert properly. That is a one test case. Then once you insert it, and when you are able to tighten the cap, then you should be able to legibly write this pen. You should be able to write properly in this pen. Then there should be a gripper also should be properly been adapted in this. So you should have a proper gripper, and this gripper should be able to hold properly to write the words and characters. And also there should be an barcode in the pen. So ensure that you write a test case. There should be a barcode also should be there in the pen. That is another test case. Then whatever the cap you have, you should be able to hold the pen properly, and there should be a lock should be there. So you are able to see it, right? There is a lock is there. That is should work properly, and you should be able to open without much challenging. Hold it properly, and so you should have. Again, there is also name is in this. You should be able to validate that name with that. So these are the some of the important test cases you can write for the ball pen. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and learning how to write the test case for the pen. If you like this video, please click on like button and bell notification. Please click on like button. If you are visited for the first time Testingshala YouTube channel, please click on subscribe button and bell notification so that all our future videos related to software testing. Thanks for watching this video. Bye for now. Take care.
So I'm going to explain you what are the different types of test cases you should write for logout functionality. The first test case for logout functionality would be, what you should do is, once we log into the application by giving username and password, then if there is a successful login, that means you are inside the application. When you are inside the application, you should see the option, the logout option. Second test case is, when you click on logout, let's say you are going to click on logout link. When you are clicking on logout, it should directly take you to login functionality. If the requirement says that you should go back to some other page, then you should go as per that requirement. Third test cases is, when you click on logout, you should goes back to login. That is a normal behavior. Now when you click on the browser back button, you should not take you back to the application. Perform the logout operation from multiple devices. Let's say you have a laptop, you have a mobile, you have a desktop. Then what you do is, try to access the application using all the three devices with the same user, then try to log in, then followed by logout. See what happens. The validation needs to be performed based on the requirements defined in your application. The certain application you may be able to log on with the multiple locations at the same time. In certain application like bank application, it doesn't allow you to log in multiple places at the same time with the same username credentials. The logout button should be there somewhere in this location. If the requirement says that if it is somewhere, it should be on the bottom, then you should validate appropriately. So if it is somewhere in this location, then you should validate appropriately as per the requirement. Then the sixth is, you should also verify the grammar and spell check of the logout panel. The seventh is, when you place your mouse on logout, then it should be a link. Link should be there for logout, because link should be there to click. Eighth is, you should also validate about session ID. Every login, it creates a unique session ID. If you log out, that session ID should get deleted or it should destroyed. After logging out, if you use the same session ID, try to log in, it should not allow you to log in. That is the 8th important test cases.